Convention, Virginia's Independence Day. I've asked compatriot Jim Watts to join me at the podium. Before we talk about the specifics of the Fifth Virginia Convention, I want to set the stage for how we got there. The convention convened May 6th to July 5th, 1776 in Williamsburg. To put things in perspective, on June 11th, 1776, the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee of 5 to draft a document became known as the Declaration of Independence. Appointment of the Committee of 5 followed Virginian Richard Henry Lee's proclamation to Congress calling for independence. Lee was acting on instructions from the Fifth Virginia Convention that on 15 May instructed Virginia delegates to the Second Continental Congress to vote for independence. On June 7, 1776, Virginia delegate Richard Henry Lee of Westmoreland County proposed to Congress, "These united colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent states."
What brought Virginia and the other colonists to this point? We must look back to actions by British Parliament and the King of England. To pay for the French and Indian War, England started a series of attempts to levy taxes on American colonists. The effort to tax resulted in the colonies declaring no taxation without representation, and an ever-increasing number of protests against Parliament's actions. Things came to head in 1774 with the Intolerable or Coercive Acts, which included Britain closing the port in Boston.
When the Virginia House of Burgesses voted for solidarity with Bostonians, Virginia Governor Dunmore dissolved the House. The delegates simply moved to Raleigh Tavern and began to discuss future actions. The First Virginia Convention was held in Richmond in August 1774 in defiance of Governor Dunmore. The delegates voted to support Boston, declaring that attack on one colony was attack on all. They also banned the importation of British goods and the export of tobacco to Britain. And they elected delegates to the First Continental Congress.
By March 1775, things were really heating up. Fearing a slave uprising, Dunmore removed powder from the magazine in Williamsburg. Removal of powder infuriated colonists. Former Burgesses held the Second Virginia Convention in Richmond in March 1775. That convention is remembered for Patrick Henry's March 23, 1775 speech containing, "I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty or give me death." His speech also contained the words, "The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms." Henry argued for armed resistance, and the Second Virginia Convention passed resolutions preparing Virginia's defense, effectively mobilizing troops.
On April 19, 1775, the gale from the north predicted by Patrick Henry came true with the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Following the gunpowder incident, an angry response from Virginians, Governor Dunmore abandoned Williamsburg fearing for his life. He went aboard the HMS Fowley, anchored in the York River.
In July 1775, the Third Virginia Convention convened in Richmond. They created a committee of safety to act as the executive branch in the absence of a royal governor. They ordered the raising of regular troops and divided Virginia into 16 military districts.
Meanwhile, Governor Dunmore was busy causing more colonial dissension. On November 7, 1775, he declared martial law and ordered freedom to slaves who would support Britain. On 9 December, he ordered a strike against Virginia Regiment at Great Bridge. The Patriots won a resounding victory. The 1st of 1776 saw the bombardment of the port of Norfolk with naval cannon and the burning of most of the buildings. After the Battle of Gwyn's Island, July 8th to 10th, 1776, where the Patriots won a decisive victory, Royal Governor Dunmore headed north, ending British rule in Virginia.
The Fourth Virginia Convention was held at Williamsburg from December 1775 to January 1776. They directed the raising of more troops by authorizing additional regiments, and they created a temporary Virginia Navy. They continued to expand the powers of the Committee of Safety to manage Virginia's independent affairs.
And this leads us to the Fifth Virginia Convention held May 6th to July 5th, 1776 in Williamsburg. On May 15th, 1776, the convention declared the government of Virginia, as formerly exercised by King George III in Parliament, was totally dissolved in light of the King's repeated injuries and his abandoning the helm of government and declaring us out of his allegiance and protection. This declaration made Virginia independent of Great Britain. May 15, 1776 is Virginia's Independence Day.
According to James Madison's correspondence for May 15th, Williamsburg residents took down the Union Jack from over the colonial capital and ran up a Continental Union flag, which kept the Union Jack of the British Empire in the canton and added 13 red and white stripes of the self-governing East India Company. Warner Workman is showing his flag.
And this is the first flag that flew over the new Commonwealth of Virginia. The convention, the 5th Virginia Convention, adopted 3 additional resolutions. They called for a Declaration of Rights. They called for the establishment of a Republican Constitution. They called for federal relations with which other colonies would have relations and for alliances with which other foreign countries would have them. They also directed delegates to the Continental Congress to vote to declare independence.
The Virginia Declaration of Rights. Delegate George Mason of Fairfax County largely authored the Virginia Declaration of Rights, a listing of 16 individual citizen rights. This document, adopted on June 12, 1776, became the foundation for the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, adopted on December 15, 1791. The Virginia Declaration of Rights contained phrases and language that appears nearly verbatim in the Declaration of Independence. The 5th Virginia Convention gave Virginians rights not included in the federal Constitution until 15 years later. It is interesting to note that the Virginia Bill of Rights, Article 16, addresses freedom of religion. The Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, passed on January 16, 1786, is the foundational document authored by Thomas Jefferson that established the Church of England in Virginia and guaranteed religious freedom to all, regardless of faith. It is a key precursor to the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The anniversary of the Declaration of Rights, the Virginia Declaration of Rights, will be held June 13th at 10 a.m. at Gunston Hall.
Virginia's first Constitution. The primary author was George Mason, with contributions by Thomas Ludwell Lee and other members of the convention. The Constitution established a bicameral legislature, a House of Delegates and Senate, the office of governor, established a system of courts with a Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, General Court, judges in Chancery, which handles probate challenges, judges of Admiralty, seagoing operations, the Office of Attorney General, and more. An important, one may say critical element of Virginia's first Constitution is a statement dissolving the relationship between Virginia and the Crown of Britain, Great Britain. Effectively, the first part of the Virginia Constitution is Virginia's formal Declaration of Independence. Listen carefully and you will recognize many of these statements for what we hold as the most important documents in the history of the United States. One may argue that much of the Declaration of Independence got its ideas from the Virginia Constitution. Please listen carefully.
The Constitution, or form of government, agreed to and resolved upon by the delegates and representatives of the several counties and corporations of Virginia. Whereas George III, King of Great Britain and Ireland, and Elector of Hanover, heretofore entrusted with the exercise of the kingly office in this government, hath endeavored to pervert the same into a detestable and insupportable tyranny, by putting his negative on laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good, by denying his governors permission to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation for his assent, and, when so suspended, neglecting to attend to them for many years, by refusing to pass certain other laws unless the persons to be benefited by them would relinquish the inestimable right of representation in the legislature.
By dissolving legislative assemblies repeatedly and continually, for opposing with manly firmness his invasions of the rights of people. When dissolved, by refusing to call others for a long space of time, thereby leaving the political system without a legislative head. By endeavoring to prevent the population of our country, and for that purpose obstructing the laws for the naturalization of foreigners. By keeping among us in times of peace standing armies and ships of war.
by effecting to render the military independence of and superior to the civil power, by combining with others to subject us to a foreign jurisdiction, giving his assent to their pretended acts of legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us of the benefits of trial by jury,
for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever, by plundering our seas, ravaging our coasts, burning our towns, and destroying the lives of our people, by inciting insurrections with our fellow subjects with the allurement of forfeiture and confiscation, by prompting our Negroes to rise in arms among us, those very Negroes whom, by the inhuman use of his negative, he hath refused us permission to exclude by law,
by endeavoring to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions of existence, by transporting, at this time, a large army of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy unworthy the head of a civilized nation, by answering our repeated petitions for redress with a repetition of injuries, and finally, by abandoning the helm of government and declaring us out of his allegiance and protection.
I, which several acts of misrule the government of this country as formally exercised under the Crown of Great Britain, is totally dissolved. Let me repeat that last phrase. By which several acts of misrule the government of this country as formally exercised under the Crown of Great Britain is totally dissolved. The first Virginia Constitution was adopted on June 29, 1776, just 5 days before the Declaration of Independence, and 11 years before the United States Constitution. And remember, Virginia adopted the Virginia Declaration of Rights on June 13, 1776. Many rights reserved for the people of Virginia were not incorporated into the United States Constitution until the Bill of Rights were adopted over 15 years after the adoption of the Virginia Declaration of Rights.
In summary, the Fifth Virginia Convention made major contributions to the governance of Virginia well ahead of the establishment of the federal government. The convention declared independence from Great Britain on May 15, 1776, adopted the Virginia Declaration of Rights on June 13, 1776, and adopted the first Constitution in the United States on June 29, 1776. When the first Virginia Constitution was adopted, the convention elected Patrick Henry, Virginia's first governor. One may rightly conclude that Virginia paved the way to independence and formation of government that has survived for 250 years. Loudoun County applauds Josiah Clapham and Francis Payton for their contributions as Loudoun County's delegates to the Fifth Virginia Convention.
3 huzzahs for the men who were delegates to the Fifth Virginia Convention. Hip hip, huzzah! Hip hip, huzzah! Hip hip, huzzah!